Randy, thank you for coming on the show. Nice to finally meet you.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. This is cool.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, for the viewer, for the listener that may not know who Randy Lee Kennedy is, who R.L. Kennedy is, go ahead and give them a little bit of a tidbit on who you are, like books, life, where you live. Like, who are you?
I could go on.
Yeah. Oh,
So
please do. I mean, we got
Randy is
time.
my real name. I know people are terrified when they see it like on the internet and nobody knows how to pronounce it, but it's Randy Lee, so I just go by Randy to keep it simple for people.
Sure.
I'm from Nevada. I grew up outside of Reno, kind of around Lake Tahoe. Went to school at Arizona State, kind of moved around. I was a radio DJ for like 10 years.
Oh,
So
cool.
that was my life path. And then I got older and that was exhausting. I thought I was going to be clubbing when I was 40 and living the high life. Um,
So that kind of DJ, like that kind of like.
yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For a
Okay.
radio station, but top 40 hits and party all night and then by
Oh,
like 20,
wow.
I can't stay up that late. I'm getting old. Um, well, I've been working at a law office, so I work full time. I'm in Indiana now. I actually took a radio job out here and then met an Indiana boy and then never left. And a couple kids,
Oh.
family life out in
It's
the Midwest.
almost a Journey song. Almost. There was almost a.
Almost.
I was so close, Randy. So
Indiana
close.
prefers John Mellencamp, as I've come to learn since he was like born here and he's like a god here. I don't know. That was new to me.
Got it. I mean, technically, depending on what part of Indiana, he could be a small town boy. So, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's not South Detroit, but, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day, I think. So, your work. So the Underground series that you've done, starting with Shelter Below, they've been popping. Congratulations. Reviews are coming in really, really nicely. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you did just finish the series?
Yes,
Or
the
the
last
series was okay.
and that's probably the most fun I've had writing a series, and it just like flew out of my brain. It was just a really fun ride.
Awesome. That's usually a very, very good sign that you've A, done good work, and B, maybe have found your niche genre that you just kind of can
Yeah.
flourish in without putting in more effort than is, I would say, needed. Because I've gone outside of my comfort zone several times to write other stories, and I've had some struggles here and there putting the stories together because it's just that little different process based on the pacing of the story or locations and that kind of stuff. So action adventure, I know I can put together pretty easily just because I love it and I'm used to it, and it's just easier for me.
Right.
Easy for me. I don't want to be that guy.
You
But
are.
no, but when I can tell when I put together these stories, there's just certain stories that I just find myself doing so much better in from the get-go.
Yes.
And usually when you can find something like that, when you can, I guess, the self-realization of it, wow, that was a lot easier than maybe some other books have. That's kind of cool. That's a good thing to process. So congratulations for that. But anything else coming down the pike for you as far as the same type of genres, same type of
I'm
stuff?
definitely sticking with it. I did clean romance for a while, which is another one
Hmm.
of my loves, and that is a little bit in my post-apocalyptic work. There's still some of that kind of bleeds over because everything I write has a little bit of that undertone. Just because my favorite
It's
in films, there's always a love story, and not necessarily like man, woman, romantic. It could be father, son,
yeah.
grandparent, grandchild, and it just that like human connection for me is really important. So
Yeah, it's the human element of the story. So I mean, yeah,
yeah, especially
absolutely.
for post-apoc, it's
Mhm.
obviously a lot of what ifs and fiction there, but I like to try to make it as real as possible with real people going
Sure.
through something that we haven't been through yet, if it happens. But
Yeah.
so that the bleed over of the what ifs, but reality of real people and what I would do, and that kind of thing. So it's
Oh yeah, no. And that's key because that's like you get into certain stories and it's like you have like your creature features, for instance, where obviously the story itself is very much heavily centered around the monster
mhm,
and very much expected, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have stories where you can even like I guess in post-apoc, the best example would be like The Last of Us. So those video games are like they're legendary in today's world now because they won Game of the Year. Both games won Game of the Year, but they are known, the production company behind it, which is Naughty Dog, which also did the Uncharted series, they are known for their unbelievable writing. And the post-apocalyptic series, The Last of Us, yes, it's a monster series, it's a horror series, but man, those characters, you fall for them and you care about what happens to them, and it's like it's emotional, it's gut wrenching, but it's also badass and action packed and horrific at the same time. So it's like you can blend in that human element into anything. It's just whether you, as the writer in this case, choose to.
And that's what makes or breaks something for me when I read it or
Sure.
watch or listen to a song or whatever it is,
Hmm.
that's what gets me. So that's what I try to do because that's what I like. So
Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, all of the books that I've put together, I can't even really think of one that I haven't. They're 100% character driven, and they have to be, or else if I can't connect with the character, I feel like it's just all for naught, you know.
right.
And I did the same thing with post apocalyptic with my Dead Moon series, which will be getting republished shortly. And it's the same idea. It's I tell people it's the most horrific, endearing love story you'll ever read, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no. The central theme of at least the first book was a marriage being rekindled by a horrific world event,
Mm,
because it was bicker, bicker, bicker. They fell out of love with each other. Um, their jobs got in the way. They're just too tired to make it work anymore. And then the world ends.
I love it. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they realize, like, I can't do this alone.
Right.
Like, and that, like, the end of the world, like, reinvigorated their love for each other because they realized how stupid they've been, wasting all this time. And now so they're, and I've had people message me, they're like, the underlying story behind this was so emotional and like so like real.
I
And I'm
love
like, well, yeah, I did it on purpose. It's like I went out of my way to make sure that these people mattered, you know.
that's
And
good. It takes the end of the world sometimes for people to come to
you
their
know what, sometimes it does, sometimes it does. And that's okay. Like I've told authors and maybe up and coming authors, I'll say. I mean, I'm not the oldest veteran in this industry. I've done it for about 8, 9 years now.
that's
But
right.
and I said the best thing you can do is humanize your characters. It's the number one compliment that I've gotten, is that readers said, I can identify with your characters no matter who they are. And that's just because I've gone out of my way to make sure that the backstory was legitimate. And it's a big deal to the reader. Because I mean, if it's a big deal to us as the author, I mean, we're also readers,
Right.
right? So I mean, I don't know. I mean, and you obviously have the same outlook on your characters.
Definitely. Yeah.
So no, that's good. I mean, I'm happy to hear that, honestly, because it's some people, um they're not like aware of that, and that's like the self awareness that a writer really needs, and it's just refreshing to hear that, especially in the post apocalyptic genre. I like that a lot. But what is next for you with the underground kind of being wrapped up?
Now that I just finished that, I'm kind
Hmm.
of thinking about that, and I just accidentally started something, which I do. I'll sit down to write, and then all of a sudden I'm 40,000 words in, and like, oh, I didn't know I was going to be starting a new book today.
Yep.
Uh, but
Yep. You don't
still,
have to go into super deep detail. I don't, because it's a very, very like trap question, and I don't mean
it is,
that.
like, it's not a secret, but I don't really know yet what it is. I'm one of those people. I'm a pantster, so I kind of
Yeah.
just let it flow out,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I have an idea where it's going, but it's still post-apocalyptic. I like the power grid going down. I really like the idea. It's so realistic to me and so plausible. And the more I've been in this mindset, you take note of all these crazy things happening around us, and
Yep.
California now with this heat wave, and their power grid may go down, and
Not allowed to charge their electric cars.
exactly. And I
I'm sorry.
don't
I had to say it.
know.
I had to say it. I'm sorry.
I didn't. I love you, California, but
No, I know.
but I love the idea of how dependent we are on technology, and I think
Yeah.
that that's almost more catastrophic for mankind
Oh,
than, like,
yeah.
alien invasion and stuff. Like, we have our own problems of real, could happen at any moment.
Oh, of course.
And I just think
Yeah.
that that's cool for being so far fetched, but like, is it? That's my mind, and I love that.
Yeah, no, it's actually kind of terrifying sometimes when you think about it, because it doesn't take a nuclear holocaust. It doesn't take
Mm,
a North Korean missile. It doesn't take it. It can just happen because of the death by a thousand paper cuts kind of thing. Like one thing, one thing, one thing, one thing, and then all of a sudden
mhm.
grid is down and we are absolutely boned. I mean,
I
it's
love
just
what ifs because that's just incredible to me. So I love that idea.
oh yeah, yeah, and I do the same thing, but I do it with the historical background. So it's the same idea. It's the what ifs of history, right? So it's the same idea. It's like, oh well, that would be really cool to write about, but what if blah 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 was happening instead, or what if uh, the first Jack Riley book? What if the Nazi gold train really did exist, and the Nazis were that close to dipping into its value before they surrendered to the Allies? It's like, what if, it's like, wow, that would have changed the world
For sure.
as we know it
Like
because of
that idea.
financing their front. Yeah. But being able to do that. So it's being able to add in that what if question to really any scenario, especially when you're talking about like end times and like that kind of stuff. And I mean, that alone, just that one question is a series.
Absolutely. I love it.
No, that's awesome. And I've dabbled like my Dead Moon series. I've dabbled in that type of stuff, but I guess for me, it's like I like that style because it's very like in the moment, and it's like the day to day lives of those people matter, because it's like it's a change in their life, and like their personal life, the outlook on their life. It's like, oh wow, I used to do this, and now all of that's gone, and now what do I do?
Right.
And that's a tall task too. So I mean, if you can get pretty decent at writing that genre, that's it's impressive, because it's not easy, because it's a lot of what if, like you said.
Yeah. But that also makes it easy because you can kind of just, this is what I think, this is what I imagine it to be like.
Oh, of course, yeah. So saying you said you were a pantser, and uh, people know by now, because I ask this question all the time, is the two major sides of the author branch, I guess, is the Uber outliner who writes the book before they write the book,
Mhm.
and then there's the pantser, someone that writes the seat from the seat of their pants. I identify as someone who's kind of in the middle. I don't overly outline. I outline enough to get the story started, and then to kind of see where it wants to go. And then I'll have like scenes that I want to add in later in the book, because I just think they're really cool, and I want to make sure they actually fit into the story.
Seems pretty
Um,
well planned. I mean, that's a little more. Thought.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have like the Excel spreadsheet, so I
One
know.
notes ball and
Yeah, I know a few people that do that, and it's like literally, oh, here's the Excel of the outline. I'm like, what? Like, I'm like, I show on every show. I'm yellow ledger pad guy,
yeah.
so I literally buy stacks of them from
Well,
Office Depot or wherever, and that's
speaking of
what I use.
ads, this series is the first series that I ever typed. I handwrite all my books, and that was always a big thing for me. Is I love the act of actually writing. So about 4 or 5 legal pads is 80 to 100,000 words.
Oh my
I
god.
would handwrite everything. So in my office, I just have stacks and stacks of all the legal pads from all the books I've written. And I thought I was just so eager to write this that I just sat down one day at a computer. I was like at a writing retreat, and it just flowed so quickly that I didn't go back. And so I don't know if that helped my productivity or made it faster or whatever, but it was just kind of a different process for me typing it all first instead of handwriting it and then the going back to type it and changing things.
Yeah, interesting, because there's always studies about writing versus typing, and how writing ingrains it in your memory faster and deeper,
Mhm.
with anything in life, like writing a letter or writing your notes down versus typing them into your phone and then forgetting that they're there 6 months later. If you write it down on a piece of paper, you're more apt to remember what you wrote, and that's just the modern age
And
of.
showed you my phone right now. I can't because but there are post-it notes on the back of the list of the things I need to do, my grocery list. I don't use my phone because I like to write out what I need and then I can.
Oh yeah. I'll use my phone just if I'm out and about and I don't have another choice, or if I'm laying in bed and I'm like, am I really going to go into my office and get a ledger pad and then come back to bed? And I've done it. I've actually slept with a ledger pad next to my side of the bed for a couple of years. Actually,
Yeah,
I've done that.
notebooks by my bed right now. I have one in my car. I keep one in my purse. I'm that girl. I just there.
Yeah, no, I've done it. I've done it. Believe me. But so no, that's interesting that you've actually put together your entire story on ledger pads. That's I've honestly never heard of that. Not that I've talked to every author out there, but the people that I have, even before I started doing this show, like I know a lot of people like me that just have the pads and that's what they use for their notes and that's what they use for like more, I guess, their outline. But writing an entire story by hand and multiple that's insane.
I,
That's
part of
insane,
it
Randy.
just my lifestyle always being on the go. I'm writing at soccer practice. I'm writing in the car on the way to pick up. So I don't always necessarily have a laptop and a plug. And, I'm literally writing in line at the grocery store and I can just pull out a notebook and I'm there with my legal pad at the doctor's office, because I can't take my laptop in and I'm just writing my book. So I thought for me, it was like very accessible for me to be able to get words down in weird places.
Yeah, no,
The phone is too tiny for me to be like typing in Google Docs on a phone. So the notebook
yeah.
works.
Yeah, no, I've done that. Like I just literally use like the notes app. It's just the one that comes on the phone. And I'm just like I'll have like a set of dialogue that I want to like incorporate. And it's like, oh, if these two characters, just horribly random scenes. And I'll literally just write like J colon what he says, M colon what she says, and then I'll have like a little where are they or what are they doing, like that type of stuff. And then it's because it's like I'm very much scene oriented, like movie oriented. So it's like I see it from like the director's chair.
I agree.
Yeah, so it's like I'll see the scene first. That's why it's like when I'm putting a story together. So this I'll lead in with this too. So for the next bit. So when I like put a story together, um, since most of my books are some type of world travel, I very 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 much like hung on the location. So like the book I'm currently getting published is based on my version of Shangri-La. So it's based in like Nepal, Tibet, like that area, or in the Himalayas.
Have you been there to any of
No,
this?
no, I'm not a big. See, this is what's dumb is I'm not a big traveler. Even though like my entire world is based on the thing behind me.
Right. And I'm a
Uh,
traveler and I'm so terrified, even though I've been to 30 countries and all the states, and I'm terrified to write in another location that I haven't spent a lot of time in or that I'm not currently in because I think, what if it's changed? And then, I get murdered for not getting it right. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the unfortunate part of this business is the you're always going to have the critics, whether you do something phenomenal or not.
right.
So, but yeah, no, and so like the location is so important to me. So it's like I'll usually find the location first, and then go, ooh, I want to write a story about that because I've never written about the Amazon, or I've never written about in like I'll see a beautiful fjord in Norway and go, ooh, that's cool. Like I want to write about that. It's beautiful because like the scenery is so important in like the travel action adventure, archaeological thriller as we call them now. So I was wondering, like, so like with you, with I guess in this case, in this specific genre, in the post-apoc, um, when it comes to like putting down the story, like obviously you have like whatever the disaster is going to be like the central like idea of the book. But as far as like locations are concerned, like obviously this is something that's I'm not sure if it's like just US based or if it's global in this case, but if it is, like, where do you go from there?
Definitely US based because that's like my comfort zone. Um, for me, the interesting thing is these ideas kind of came to me. I grew up rural in Nevada, middle of nowhere, and we had a super weird neighbor who started prepping and building a tree house so he could see the government coming to take over. And then he started underground and he built a bunker and it caved in because of the snow, and he spent his life savings doing it. And then the house was eventually foreclosed on because he couldn't pay his bills because he was dumping thousands of dollars into his structure. And then the government came and dug it all up and the banks, got rid of it. And that was rural, but Nevada. Well, now that I'm out in the Midwest, I've come across even more people kind of with that mindset. And just, I think the rural setting for me, wherever you are, it's not necessarily a state or the Midwest or any particular area, but I think the more rural you are, the more maybe like-minded people you have with the resources, you know, people with gardens, people with, you know, maybe that mindset of prepping for whatever may come. So I think my books in this type of setting, my mind just goes rural because that's my experience. I've never lived in a high rise, you know, I go to Chicago all the time, but thinking of the power grid going down there is like too messy for me. You know, that's going to be a mess.
Yeah, and that was the setting of the first Dead Moon book was Manhattan. So
And I just,
yeah, that was a mess. That was a mess.
people in crowds, and you just think it's
Yeah.
hard to wrap my mind around chaos in a situation like that when it seems chaotic enough in the middle of nowhere. I can imagine with, you know, thousands and thousands and millions of people around.
Yeah, no, that would be rough. Like, what is the movie? I think it was a Deep Impact years
I've
ago,
seen that.
where they had the meteor, the asteroid coming down to destroy Earth, and they sent the team up to it's basically like Armageddon,
Right.
that style, those disaster movies from the late 90s, early
Love,
2000s.
love it. Yep.
Yeah. And I remember in the movie where like the highway, it was like I'm in Florida. So when we have a massive hurricane coming through, and like a massive hurricane to the point to where they're like evacuating people,
Right.
not that it happens all that often, but like the highways are just gridlock. You can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, imagine that times infinity during a
Sure.
post-apocalyptic event when like half the people on the road are also dead. It's like,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
not just stuck in traffic. It's like I'm like I'm writing that when I'm doing my series, and I'm like, man, this sucks.
It does. Yeah.
And that's like the uber realism of it is I try to incorporate it. So it's like here, like our major highways are like the Florida Turnpike and like I-95
Hmm.
on the East Coast. And I'm like, well, number one, those are completely and utterly unusable.
Right.
Because in this case, everybody's going to try and use them because the East, the coast of Florida is where everyone lives.
Exactly.
So so in my case, my guys, they come down here in the second book because this is where all my characters or my two main characters are originally based is in South Florida. And they go west and they go across the state to the West Coast, and they take like some of like the country roads out there. And I'm like, well, if I'm them, that's probably what I'm going to do because A, I live here. So I know what to avoid during terrible traffic.
Right.
And B, what is realistic for a survivor? A survivor is not going to be like, oh, let's go to the most populated highway in the entire state and think I'm
Absolutely.
going to get through Florida, which is just one long state. Oh, yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you do that, the reader's going to be like, wow, this is like awful because this isn't the first book in the genre that they've read or the first movie they've seen. Like this is like, so you have to be very careful.
And that's why I stick rural, because it's even in the middle of nowhere that has its own different challenges than busy highways and, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So curious, because you said you've done romance and stuff, but what drove you to like switch gears and then try the sci-fi post-apoc stuff?
Well, growing up, I mean, I was devouring Stephen King books at a very young age, probably too young now that I'm a parent. I don't know that I'm approved of that. Um, I always loved thriller books, you know, like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stein and all that. Like, you know,
Yeah.
when you're learning to read in middle school and high school. So I always loved that genre. But I started writing when my kids were really young, and I felt some weird pull of like, well, I can't write a book that has bad words. And um,
Sure.
it just felt weird timing to me as I'm like taking care of newborns to write something kind of dark. So, you know, my other love is clean romance, and it was nice and light. And I thought, oh, my children could read this someday. And now they're old enough. And I'm like, well, you know, all the bad words, so I can do whatever I want. And so I think I kind of finally was just like, this is what I grew up loving to read, and this is what I love writing. And I pulled out a box, and I wrote my first book when I was 9. And I
Oh,
found it
wow.
because it's written, of course, in a notebook. I
Yeah.
read it as an adult, and it was creepy. And I thought, okay, this held up. Like, good job, 9-year-old me. And so that was the first thriller that I published. And I found my love again for like that genre, and just I like creeping myself out and the mystery of it and the fast-paced excitement, and it's just such a different vibe than the romance stuff.
Sure.
And so then the post-apocalyptic thing kind of came along, and I have some friends that write in the genre, and they'd been trying to get me to do it for years. And I had a story in my head based on the neighbor that I grew up with and the crazy guy. And I'm thinking, I watched this guy pour his life savings into something that the bank took because he wasn't living his life, in the midst of planning for whatever he was planning for.
Yeah, he was prepping for something that he never saw
Yeah.
come to fruition.
Yeah. And just that interesting mindset of it being so important to somebody that they're not present and, giving up all their resources. And so that was kind of in my mind. And I was just encouraged by a really good friend of mine, G. Stelter. She writes amazing post-apoc books and very strong female-driven characters. And she just kept nudging me. And I was like, okay, I'll write a book just for you because you're my friend and I like you. And then I just couldn't stop. Once I started, it was like, okay, I know why she's making me do this, because she knew I would love it. And it's just a fun ride. Cool. So all the thoughts that were in my head, it's so like freeing just to get them on paper. And you're like, oh gosh, I've been thinking about all this stuff for years. And
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I am. I guess that's what I do with the action adventure stuff is, you live vicariously through your characters, right? So it's all this world travel, all that stuff. I have no interest in doing it.
Really?
I would want to go there, but I hate travel.
Oh gosh, I love traveling.
I hate it. I don't fly well. I have like inner ear problems, so I'm like in dying like pain.
Oh no.
Like daggers in my ears. And driving just sucks. And I don't want to go anywhere. I want to get there. I want to be there. Like I want to experience the world. I just don't want to have to travel. I'm very, very, very much in the horrible mindset of a travel action adventure author.
But a lot of magic that happens in the process to get there. And I was very lucky. My mom worked for an airline, so we flew for free growing up. So I was able to travel all over the world, and sometimes we didn't get where we were supposed to be going, and but that was half the fun. And
yeah, I traveled a ton when I was a kid because my parents loved traveling. So it was like we would go out like over the summer. We went out to the Southwest, and we went out to like Grand Junction, and we went out to Nevada. We were in Vegas for like 5 or 6 days when I was a kid. Stayed at Treasure Island, saw the boat show from like the 20-something floor. I mean, it was an experience. And then, we're out in Colorado, and we went to Zion National Park. We went to Vail. We went to Pikes Peak. We were out there for like 4 weeks, just driving. And, we flew out there, got a rental, drove for 3-4 weeks, and experienced like all of it. Like that, as a kid, it was fine. But now that I have to do the driving and I have the kids in the back, and like, I don't know. I've also been like the last 2 times I've done any major driving. This is like, well, one was major driving. It was like 14 hours into Tennessee in a day.
Okay.
And then the other drive shouldn't have been a big deal. It was to Clearwater over in Tampa, which is like a 4-hour drive for me.
It's like sideways just across the state, right? So
yeah, so Tampa is directly west of Orlando, on the west coast of Florida. I'm down in like the southeast part of the state, so I have to cross the state and then go over. So that drive I was telling you about, where I would want to travel west across the middle of the state and then up the west coast, I basically did that. The problem is I blew the back tire on my car out in the middle of nowhere, and then blew the donut an hour and a half later. So it took me 6.5 hours to make a 3.5-hour drive with my kids in the back.
Which is,
yeah, that sucked. The trip was great. Like once we got there, it was great because we got to see some good friends. Great. It was actually for my birthday. We went up there, so that was a great start to it.
Memories. They're not going to remember the bad stuff, so you're still a hero, and you know.
Yeah, they were great. Thank God, because my kids are 9 and 5. So, but they were great. I was shocked at how well they actually like took the issues. The Tennessee drive was my own fault because I'd never done like super long distance driving like that before, especially with the kids. And we're leaving here early in the morning, and then you realize it's 14 hours. And when you so you're a Florida boy, born and raised. Like I get nosebleeds at like the top of like a landfill because there's no elevation here. Okay. So when you decide to drive through the Smoky Mountains at midnight,
and that's a drive, that's intense.
And you're a Florida boy, and you're in a rental, and you have your entire kin in your car that you're responsible for if you decide to go off the road at midnight.
I-
Yeah. And then you get into tent, and then you get to your cabin and it's 2 in the morning. You've been on the road for 14 hours and you're like, never again. You're just like wired and like your nerves are fried. You're like, I never want to make that drive again. And then, of course, I had one of the best weeks of my life
Of course,
because
yeah.
I love that part of the country. I love southern Tennessee, those mountains, the people, everything. So I'm like, well, the next time I make the drive, I just have to be smart, and I'll leave at 10 at night and then arrive when the sun is up. And
So we're taking the kids to all 50 states. We've been to 46 already.
oh, nice.
We've
Nice.
I say we have driven to most of them, but it's my husband driving all the time, and he'll drive 19 hours and it's a good time, and he enjoys it.
Oof.
I'm narcoleptic. I'm 30 minutes in and I'm out, so I can't. I'd be blowing tires and all sorts of stuff. It's to see the country. I think we're lucky to have so many different places to go that you can drive to, but it's not
Yeah,
for
my dad has seen all 50 states. His last state was Alaska, and we went on a cruise. We went on a princess cruise in Alaska when I was a kid, and that was his last state to see. And he had seen, like I said, he had seen them all. So that was his very last state. So he's been to all 50. I've been to more than half of them for sure. I've probably been to about 30 of them if I had to guess. And most of the ones I haven't been to are like middle of the country. So like I've been to everything on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. I've been East Coast up to, I haven't been to anywhere in the Northeast, funny enough. I haven't been anywhere past like Virginia,
Oh,
like North Carolina, Virginia. For whatever reason, we just never traveled into the Northeast. But my whole family's from Michigan, so I've been to a lot of Midwestern states. My wife's family's from Wisconsin, so we've been up there a bunch. That's a trip. Flying direct from South Florida to St. Paul, Minneapolis, and then driving 3.5 hours east into northern Wisconsin.
but not
Um,
don't go up there in winter.
no, 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 no. We go up there in July, and it's freaking beautiful. It's like it's the best weather you could ask for. It's so pretty. There's no humidity. It's just gorgeous. Um, but yeah, that's a trek just because it's flying, which I don't like to do. It's a decent drive in a rental after you've done a lot of flying, and you're just like, of course, then once you get there, you're fine. But yeah, that trip home is actually where I blew up my right eardrum on the flight. So
Gosh.
yeah, that hurt. That hurt. That ruined flying for me. I'm scared to death it's going to happen again, and then it just be so painful. So painful.
Do you think that's why you write about all these fabulous exotic places? Because you're not going there, so you can live vicariously through your characters and the research and
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I grew up so this will be actually something else I'd like to talk to you about. So this is lead in with this here is like I was very much the history geek, like the nerd. Like I would have like an atlas of the world and just read through it just because it's cool. It's like I would read something about ancient Egypt, or I'd read something about Greece. I'd read something about, Norse mythology, and just be like, it's just not American history. It's just not here. So it's just something different. It's something weird. It's something unique. Because, even though we've been around since 1776, we are a very young country when it comes to history. So it's like American history is great. I love writing about it because just like where the founding fathers, where they came from, where their inspirations from, where their culture was, and like what drove that. So it's a fun topic to write about. But like the world history, you start getting into ancient history, man. Like I've dove in. I don't know how many times I've written about like ancient Egypt and stuff like that. I just think it's so fascinating. And then you start getting into some of the other cultures of the world, and it's just like I just love it. Like I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. I grew up idolizing, Harrison Ford and Indy, and I just thought it was the coolest character ever. And my friends were Star Wars and Star Trek, and I got the fedora and the whip. You know what I mean? It's just like I just thought it was a cooler character. I fell in love with the character versus like the story,
right. Sure.
and so that's what I write now, and I just love it. So like the travel and the history part for me is like second nature. I've just always had a fascination with history, and that just happens to be in other countries. So I need to be doing research. I need to be doing travel logs. I need to be watching these YouTube channels of people traveling, like walking through the Pyramid of Giza. And, you know, I don't know what the inside looks like. I've never been there. So what do? You Google it and you watch somebody else's
Right.
travel logs. And it's fun. You Google Earth the crap out of everything. And, it's a nice resource to have. So, I mean, you should be in my genre at this point with as much as you've traveled and like
I
you've seen
travel
and
a
you've
lot,
experienced.
but I don't do history. I don't read history books. I know that's a
Yeah.
very ignorant thing to say, but it's like snooze fest, show me the movie.
Oh, I get it. I get
Um,
it.
I'm just so like present minded, focused, future. My brain's going the opposite direction, and you're like fascinated by what's happened. And I'm thinking, like, what could be coming, which obviously history gets you there. But
Yeah.
yeah, my
Yeah.
brain is just wired different. History, a lot of historical books. I'm in a great book club and we read a lot of genres, which I like about it. But sometimes we get those historical books and
Yeah, like I'm not talking about like historical reference books very much anymore. Like I'm not reading like I don't read like nonfiction. I don't read autobiographies.
Mhm.
It has to be like something truly like unique or like something that's also going to help like enhance the mission, statement at this point and be like, it needs to be like a figure that I need to know more about and, like that kind of stuff. So it's for me, it's more like, I guess the entertainment of it. I just find it so fascinating. When I see these characters off on these like inhospitable, jungles or like in the burning desert or like romping through Siberia, like that kind of stuff. I just find it so cool and fascinating and I have absolutely no want to do it. Like I said, I wouldn't mind seeing this kind of stuff. It's just the actual travel of it. It's exhausting.
I love that that's what's holding me back from seeing, all these.
And honestly, it's time. It's time and energy as well. It's just kids at their age. I mean, kids at their age, and trying to work it in and time and work. And now I have more free time than I ever have, but I'm actually working more than I ever have. So it's like, I'm now at a computer for like 60 hours a week, and yeah, like I'm like, oh, I'll be editing a few books for Conundrum and also writing my own stuff, and I'll get on the computer at 8 a.m. and then I realize it's midnight. It's like, oh, and I think I've had dinner. Did I eat? I think I had dinner. Like that kind of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, but it's just, I just get into this zone and I just keep going and I'm just doing it. Yeah, I'm sure one day it'll completely and utterly destroy my brain, but it hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten there yet. So as far as I find the genre of choice just very fascinating, and I don't mean to dwell on it, but I find it fascinating. As far as like entertainment purposes, like, is there anything in that you like? I know you said you're reading Stephen King and you're reading that kind of stuff, but as far as like movies, as far as like other books, is there anything that has just drawn you to it besides just curiosity at this point?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I think when I watch any of those movies, I'm trying to think. The last one I saw, Greenland with Gerard Butler, that was a
Hmm.
really good, interesting twist on some of it, a little bit different. And the books I've read too, I like that it can be the same idea, but they're all different in the outcome and what people speculate, and it's never happened, so we don't have that history to say, oh well, the last time this happened, it's
Sure.
I
Yeah.
kind of like that it's what if enough, that I think it gives me the creativity to kind of go with it where I want, and you can't tell me that it's wrong. you know
Sure. I
I,
think that's why I loved The Day After Tomorrow so much.
yes.
Probably my favorite disaster movie ever. And great cast, number one, great writing, characters are awesome. But they did bring in history and they brought in past events and they brought in like this has happened before. This is because of this. Like they actually had a lot of like scientific knowledge behind it to kind of like back the story.
Right.
But it was obviously the entire movie was 100% character driven. It was about this family. And I thought it was fantastic. So it's yeah, I get where you're coming from. I really do. It's just it's one of those things. Maybe it's just because I haven't lived in the genre enough. Like I said, I have my one series, but it's a very different. I get it's a survival series, obviously, but it's more like, in this case, a meteor comes to Earth and carries with it a virus, carries with it something that changes the genetic code in human beings, and anybody that witnesses its entry, it emits like a radiation, and it's just kind of like what I built as far as like the lore of the story. And so you have like the people that witnessed its entry are now monsters, and then you have everyone else. And the story is in first person present too. I don't know if you've ever written in that point of view, but when you're writing as the subconscious of the character, it takes on a whole new meaning of the story. When you're like Frank Moon is my main character, but you are Frank Moon. Like the reader, every single book comes out of his mouth and his interactions with people. And if he doesn't know what's happening, neither does the reader. And
I know some people have strong feelings about that, but first person is my jam. So
I love first person, and he is realistically the only character I've done it with, mostly because it's kind of like his territory in my mind. Like I don't want to almost like contaminate it. It's like everything I do from first person is Frank, so I just don't write other characters that way. He is the only one. And what's cool is you can get super weird, and you can get super like like squirrel, just because in the moment, if something happens, the consciousness of that person is going to shift, and then the story goes that way.
Mhm.
And I just think it's an interesting way to write, especially when your person isn't like an expert in a lot of things. Like Frank's he's a cop, and he's just surviving, so he's just like at his his just normal dude, you know. But I don't. I just think it's like I said. I just think it's a fascinating it's a fascinating subject. It's a fascinating genre, because there are a lot of great authors that do it. Like if you've ever get a chance to read, it's disaster, but it's so much more than that. It's Antarctic Rising by Jeremy Robinson.
Okay.
Um, it talks about what is it called? It's like the crust shift or slip theory or something, in that the earth, the globe, when we sit on an axis and we spin, we don't spin at a perfect circle. The
Mhm.
earth actually wobbles a little bit.
Right.
And they said every so often the earth will actually start to wobble more and more and more and more out of control, to the point to where the core will actually shift, and the crust of the earth will actually slip. And that's where like a lot of theories come from, with like Atlantis, for instance, or like Antarctica, how they're finding like signs of that it wasn't always frozen. So it's like, if it wasn't always frozen, well, then it couldn't have been always on the pole, right? So
Right. Had to, yeah.
it had to be somewhere else. And it doesn't fit the timeline of like a Pangea, or it doesn't fit the timeline of like Pangea and continental drift and that stuff. It's not that old. So based on scientific or study. So it's like, well, how? So one of the theories is that Antarctica has been where it is. It's just switched hemispheres. So you had like kind of like Day After Tomorrow, you had like a flash freezing, you had flash thawing somewhere else. So maybe it explains like the glaciers melting at extreme rates, because they weren't always there. They were somewhere else that was colder. So I thought it was an interesting concept that Jeremy put together, but then he brings in a lot of his background, which he knows. He has a lot. Like in this story, the villain is like the biblical Nephilim. So it's like the demons of the Bible, the demon seed of the Bible. And it's like I said, it's the way he puts this story together. It's like part post-apocalyptic end times,
Right.
but it's a very character-centric story.
And to craft
Um,
the science and everything go into that
yeah.
is, and I don't know that I have the brain capacity to execute something of that magnitude.
Yeah, and the research and the depth that he goes into with that story, it was something, because I had read, a decent amount of the genre, but that was the second book I read from him. This years ago. This is like over 10 years ago. And when I read that, and I'm like, this is like the most unique concept when it comes to that part of science fiction.
Yeah.
that it ended up being like more than I expected, because I expected like the thawing, I expected Antarctica, I expected Antarctica to thaw and then blossom, and then but a lot of the theory into it, like how like frogs he brings in, where frogs can freeze and then unfreeze and then just hop away.
Okay.
And there's like other animals that also do that when Antarctica thaws. So I'm like, uh-oh.
It makes me think though. I like that idea of it really makes.
Yeah, because like I said, it wasn't just a I will call it a traditional post-apocalyptic
Mhm.
thriller. There was like so much other stuff piled onto this plot point or this plot, and I was just like, wow.
Okay.
It was like I'm like I could never do that. I could never put a
Sounds
story together
daunting.
like that.
Incredible. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, like I said, and he was kind of like my first like I bought every book kind of author. Like I was just like I fell in love with his work and just went through all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
so that's like a big one for me in that genre. But again, it was also just huge historical like undertaking when it came to his research and stuff too. It wasn't like I said, it wasn't a traditional survival thriller type of thing. There was so much extra stuff that he packed into this story, and then came six novellas afterwards,
Oh
which
my
became the so yeah, it became the Antarctos saga. So it was like the original book was Antarctos Rising, and then there were two prequels, and then there were three sequels. So there were six total. So there were five novellas and six total in the series.
God.
And it was just like the aftermath of Antarctos Rising was the last three of that series. And how did they get so the island itself? What was going on, or the island, the continent? What was
Right.
going on it during the thaw, during all that stuff before the characters got there? So it was like that was the other part of the series. I was just like, oh man, I ate those stories up. And of course, they're narrated by R.C. Bray, who
Okay.
is like the voice. I mean, he's magic. But so outside of this gig, so I know you said you work full time, you work for a law firm, you have your family to take care of,
Yeah.
a lot going on, you travel a ton.
Yeah.
Anything else behind the scenes as far as like what do you do? Is there anything like personally, like hobby wise, is there anything interesting that you just do besides this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very social. So a lot of writers I know are very introverted and they don't like to
Mhm.
look at people or talk to people or have people, ask them questions. I'm so social and we have a nice network of people. We quarantine with our neighbors. We have this big group of people and we travel with them and our kids all have grown up together. And we just have a lot of parties. We celebrate everything. I mean, sports I don't even care about. We throw parties for. We make up parties. I had an Oreo tasting party. I just make up
Nice.
all the time. So I probably have or go to 3 to 5 parties a week. Whether
Oh
it's
wow.
something made up and stupid or a football party. I don't necessarily
Sure.
care about football, but I'm going to eat all the nachos and have a really good time. So
Of course. Of
I think
course.
a lot of the downtime between, work and kids and sports, my decompressing isn't being alone in a quiet room. It's like, give me more people and parties and, stuff going on. So it's just, I feel like a lot of that, just a lot of social time, girls' nights and book clubs. And it's, I have something every single night in September. And some of it's
Wow.
exciting and some of it's, PTO meetings. And I'm on the septic board for my neighborhood. And, like the
The
board,
septic board.
it's not exciting, but it's,
I
real life
know.
that like, you got to be vice president of the septic. I don't, and I am great. That's a terrible qualification. I have no business being on the vice president of the septic board, but so there's boring real life stuff that takes up time. And I think that's when I have downtime, I don't have downtime. I can't shut off because it's just, there's something every day.
Yeah.
All day.
Well, that I can relate to, not being able to shut off the thing between your ears. I mean, I get that. It's just, eh, you know what it is. I think it's a commonality between anybody with any walk of life when it has anything to do with like creative thought.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just we're both writers. So in this case, in the writing world, like I know musicians are the exact same way. It's they can't stop, and it's just they're wired. And like with me, with stories, with research, with ideas, that's hence the notepads by the side of our bed, right? So
Right.
it's like if we
Right.
weren't like that, we wouldn't need the notepad, right? It's just I get it. It's just I can't stop, and I
And I,
think it's the way we're wired.
I think a lot of people too. I mean, you think writing is very solitary, but even most of my writing is with other people. I meet once a week at the mall with a local girl in town, which I met in Vegas, and we happen to live 10 minutes from each other. I do a lot of writing retreats, and it's funny because it's like social, you know, we're all there together, and then we don't speak for like 12 hours because we're all just on our keyboards. So it's like you're not alone, even though nobody's talking. But it's weird to make a solitary activity, you know, I'm sitting next to somebody doing the same thing, but you're doing it alone, but yet with somebody, you know, and I think that
Yeah.
just keep going.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I love doing this. It's the same idea. It's the social aspect. Well, obviously meeting new people,
Mm.
but I like to see where, in this case, writers. I like to see where everyone's headspace is. You know, it's like it's interesting to me because I know me. You know what I mean? I know what I do.
You should know yourself pretty well by now.
I hope so. You know, but I like to see because you can sometimes pick up on certain um interactions with people. So like conversations, like my buddy Rick that lives down in Key Largo, down here in Florida, he's another writer, and we were talking about the whole outlining thing, and he's experimented purposefully on outlining and not outlining because he wanted to see what the process looked like as far as writing. Like he actually more or less kept track of how long it took to write the book. Like he was very interested in like the process, which I am too, but I'd never like thought about it any more than that.
I'm
And
interested in someone else to give me the data on that. Like, I don't want to be the person.
yeah, but so what he said is he's a big outliner. He'll outline every chapter and start to finish, and he just has like an idea of like me. I know most of my books, most of my chapters are 2,000 words. Most of my books, well, they used to be about 70, 80,000 words. The last couple have been much bigger and accidental. It's just the story took me, so I just kept going.
Yeah.
So, you have kind of an understanding of what your average book length is. So you can kind of like, okay, what's this many chapters, right? So he'll outline the entire book, and I'm like, wow, more power to you, man. He goes, well, the difference is I know I can sit down and write without struggling for a moment.
Mhm.
And he goes, that's why I do that. And I said, I understand that, and that's awesome. I'm just of the belief that I love to let the story grow organically. Um, just because of the way it can shape and mold, and you can kind of really find some neat little tidbits if you're not like, not saying you have to get hung up on your outline, like you can deviate, but I like writing in the moment more. I just think it's more fun. I just think it's more enjoyable.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but the way that he was explaining it and why he does it was very eye-opening to me because he's just and some of my friends, Nick Thacker, my partner at Conundrum, and Kevin Tumlinson, one of our good friends, um, Kevin wrote an entire book in 16 hours
Hmm. I believe that.
in one day. He was telling me about it. He wrote a book called How to Write a Book in 30 Days, I think is the title of it. And he went through the step-by-step process on how to properly write a 60,000 word book in 30 days. And which I actually used to do pretty often. I used to write because I would aim for 2,000 words a day, and by the end of the month I would be at 60,000 words, and usually about a month and a half I could get it done, no big deal. um, and he said, well, maybe I can write a book in 3 weeks. And then he said, maybe I can write a book in 15 days. Maybe I can write a book in a week. And then he goes, maybe I can write a book in a day. And he literally said he sat in a hotel bar restaurant lobby area in New
Interesting
York.
environment.
He was stuck in the hotel. It was horrible weather. His wife and friends they met were doing something, and he was just alone in the hotel for the day. Like he wasn't personally doing anything. So he literally went down to the bar at like 7, 8 in the morning and talked to the manager and talked to the people and like basically made a deal with them that he just needs a space to sit. And they're like, okay. So he literally sat there, made friends with the waiters and bartenders to like watch his stuff while he went up to go to the bathroom, while he went up to walk around. And he said it in about 16 hours later, I had a 60,000 word short novel.
In 6
And
hours? The most I've done in a day is like 25. I can't. Wow. I mean, that's
yeah,
impressive.
60,000 words in about 16 hours. He goes, it wasn't published ready. Don't get me wrong. He goes, it needed some work, but it 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 got done.
That's incredible.
And now Nick dictates everything now.
I've thought about trying to get into that, but I don't know if my brain to paper, if I work that way.
Yeah, he's dictating a book a week, and he's been doing it for like 8 or 9 weeks.
Dang.
He's just dictating, getting everything down, and then he'll go through and actually write it when the story needs to be worked on. It was like an interesting way of getting like, I mean, he has to have like, he has a super, super dense outline because he needs it,
Right.
but he was literally dictating the story. And I'm just like, I can't even imagine trying. Like, I wouldn't know where to start, but I just thought that was such an interesting way to do it. So, like, talking to like Kevin about that and talking to Nick about that, and like, wow, it's just like that was something that I would have never came up with on my own as far as even remotely possible. Like
So
writing a book in a day? Are you
I,
kidding me?
I don't have a lot of disposable time every day to write. So when I do have getaways or my one night a week that I write or a writing retreat, every writing retreat I've done, like Friday to Sunday, I can easily get over 40,000 words in a weekend. And so
Sure.
I get my books done because I don't have a lot of other time. So I need a few of those a year so that I can
Yep.
write half a book, in a weekend because I have to do them in those big chunks of time. Otherwise, it's hard to find the time. So I get that once you're in the zone of it just flows out by then, I guess. But
Yeah. Yeah. No. And that's, I'm lately I've been writing faster than I have in a couple of years just because I finally have the time to do it.
mhm,
I'm also doing like 9 other things, but
of course.
uh, the writings thankfully has still been, priority number one. But doing this and then doing some publishing on the side, doing artwork, doing cover art for other people. I'm doing everything under the moon in this industry. That's why my free time includes my family, and that is
Right.
it. Because this is my free time.
Yeah, and you're hanging out and still talking about writing. And yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? But I guess that's just the other side of it for me, because like for me the interesting side of it, besides putting the stories together, is the process of it. Like I'm always super interested in like, why would somebody that's got some experience in soft romance decide to write science fiction and post-apocalyptic thrillers and do pretty well at doing it? So it's like, I need to know why. It's like, why? Like, I'm just curious, because in my mind, is there, just the way I guess I'm thinking about it, is there something I'm missing out on as far as application to my own work? So it's like I'm so ingrained in action adventure stuff, and I'm very happy doing it. I love it. But is there something that I could add to it in a way to enhance it that I'm not thinking of? And sometimes the conversation, like in this case, like adding to the love story to the post-apocalyptic story, a lot of people might not do that because they might not ever think it's necessary or feasible.
Right. And I get some of that too. And it's surprising to some people. And it's just about finding the right people that, get it. But I think so many books, the things I love about certain books is when you find those other elements that make them a little different, than everything else in a genre. I think it just changes it up just enough that it keeps it interesting and fresh and something that maybe everybody else isn't doing. But I
Sure.
think it just took me being challenged to do it. Like, I dare you to do it. And then I did and was like, that was amazing. So somebody needs to dare you to, come out of your comfort zone with a different type of genre, and whether you incorporate it in what you already do or just, start fresh and try to go it on your own. I think it's good for the brain. I think it's good to challenge your brain and your writing personality with something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, you say that, and I have actually a really good example is, um, I would my philosophy when I first started, up until probably the last couple of years, was, um, if I could have a 70,000 word, super tight, start to finish book, every word counts, and it's gangbusters.
Mhm.
Is that better or worse than maybe a 90 to 100,000 word book that might have a little more fat in it as far as unnecessary content to the story itself? Like, in my head, I'm going, the obvious answer was, and again, this is just in my head. The obvious answer was the tighter book.
Mhm.
But, and this is a recent change, and this is where I was going with how my books have gotten longer now, is I was writing new book that I'm series that I'm doing with Nick, Zara Kane archaeological thriller series, and I was putting together the first draft. And the idea was I was going to make this book as big as humanly possible in order for Nick to go back and trim it down and cut the fat out. So
Okay.
I wanted to give him all the content I could come up with, even if it wasn't necessary.
And then he could decide what wasn't necessary.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you have two minds that are semi good at what they do
Mhm.
that are going to create a banger story. That was the idea. So I'm like, I didn't want to leave any stone unturned. I didn't want to leave any hint of research unresearched. And when I gave him the first draft, it was 128,000 words.
Ooh, okay.
And the prologue was 6 chapters.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Yeah. That's a story I've brought up a few times. I had this like Indiana Jones opening where it was like the first 20 minutes of the movie has nothing to do with the Holy Grail, right? Or has nothing to do with the, the Ark of the Covenant. It's like, it's just this amazing opening sequence that you just enjoy. And you're just like, this is entertaining, right?
Yeah.
So in my head, that's what I wanted. So I wrote this massive scene and he's just like, dude, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, he goes, it's great, but what do we do with this? So
Right.
it's now going to become a short story introduction. Like we're going to release it separately, but
But the love
yeah,
about that idea is, I wonder if you gave it to 10 people or 20 people, would they all have had Nick's same opinion on it? Or would, everybody has such different ideas of,
well, the issue is the book's called The Anubis Plague, and the first six chapters, Zara is in the Amazon searching for the lost city of Z. So you're like, what? What's happening? Is this the right? Did they print the cover wrong? Is this the wrong book? So he was more of the reader that would just like get like the sample on Amazon
right. And then
and go, what the
where it
hell
starts
is happening?
right.
Yeah. So I don't care. It's fine. But he goes, well, I just make I can make the short story just bigger now since it's its own book. I'm like, okay. So the problem is he read through the story and he goes, I might actually want to make it bigger.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, and my brain is going, what? Like,
Right.
that's not at all what I expected you to say. And he goes, it's really like, I like it the way it is. It's like there's scenes where they get coffee. And he goes, but it's local coffee. They're talking about the local cuisine. They're thinking it's like it's the travel guide of the area.
Mhm.
And he goes, you went nuts with the detail and it worked because you introduced Cairo. You introduced Giza. You introduced like these areas. And you introduced Levanzo, Italy, which is literally an island off the coast of Sicily. Like, and he goes, and it was it was cool. It was entertaining. It's these little tidbits that I would have never found out about. And he goes, I feel like I would do you a disservice by cutting it out. And I'm like, huh. Well, okay. So maybe I've been thinking about this all wrong over the years, where like maybe some of this fat is like entertaining in its own way because it's that research, it's that knowledge that the reader may not otherwise have ever heard of. It might just be that little tidbit that they're, interested in. And I'm like, okay. So then I decided to stay with that style in my next Jack Riley book, the Shangri-La book I just finished. And um, that got to 134,000 words.
Nice.
And I'm like describing some of the scenes to my wife, and she goes, "You can't get rid of that." She goes, they're on a road trip. They have a 4+ hour drive into the Himalayas. Jack wants coffee and breakfast. Well, damn it, I'm going to give Jack coffee and breakfast. So what did I research? Breakfast in Nepal. Like, I have no idea what they eat. Like, I don't know. Like, come to find out, they don't really drink a lot of coffee. They drink a lot of tea. And, there is coffee, but it's mostly tea. And it's like the diet and this. I'm like, that's cool. I mean, you have to make sure it doesn't like completely drag down the story, but at the same time,
Right.
it's like there's little things like that where I'm like,
And it makes it
huh.
all to the story and the area and the setting and
Yeah,
that's
like I want to showcase Nepal. I want to showcase Tibet. I want to showcase the Amazon. I want to showcase Egypt. You know what I mean? That's for me anyways, that's kind of the point. Like that like when it comes to like the world travel stuff is I am living in the character. So it's like and then like just mentally kind of like almost like restructuring the way I think about putting the story together. I'm like more open about doing it. And uh, RF Blackstone, who I did an interview with a week or two ago, he said, he goes, I got to a certain point in my current work, in my current whip, and there was this cool stuff in the area that I wanted to talk about. And I remembered you said that, you said to hell with it. I'm keeping the fat in for the experience of the story. And he goes, I started doing it in the area and I love the way the story is turning out so far. He goes, but I was always kind of afraid to add in something that wasn't like direct to the plot. And I'm like, no, I mean, I get it. And I'm still like, how is it going to be received by the general public as far as
you
that?
know, and we all have our crutches and we all have our that thing we were told one time that stuck with us and we feel like we can't commit that crime ever again. And
Yep.
that's what I love about the whole industry though, of how different we all are and how different our experiences are, and then how we're also the same, but then we're not, but we are. It's just so cool.
Yeah. I mean, how many people have always, wish the book was longer, or wish there was more to the story, or I wish it didn't end so soon, or it didn't end so. I'm like, well, it ain't going to happen anymore, guys. And you want a dense story, you're going to get a dense
You
story.
love, you don't want it to end. In a book you hate, you're like, oh my gosh, when will this ever end? And so the
Yeah.
idea to make it, as long as it's the book that people love, then you
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many comments I've gotten. I love the story. I just wish it was longer. I'm like, well, it was on purpose. I was trying to keep your attention.
right.
Every letter counted in that book, and it came out, and I achieved it. And then obviously, you just got to shut up the talking head sometimes and go, you're not going to make everybody happy. But I was just like, if there was a general criticism about my work, it was a lot of the time that people wish the story was longer. So because of
Sure.
the detail, they wanted more. And I'm like, I'll give you more. If that's what y'all truly want, I'll give you more. I don't have the problem is now it just takes me a heck of a lot longer to write a book.
Sure. If it's 140,000,
Yeah, that's what's crazy is they're just, I never would have thought the current, the Undying Kingdom is the name of the book I just finished. I never would have thought that would have been longer, and it blew past the other one by almost 20,000 words. I was like, holy moly, this is massive. And I'm like, well,
sometimes that's what you need though to tell the story, and I would stand by that and go with it.
yeah, and they're not all going to be that big. I mean, I'm going to have some stories that I just can't fit in that much stuff just based on the the subject matter. I mean, there's going to be some stories that just fall a little shorter than that, just based on um, I don't want to say struggling to put the story together, but there's just some stuff that you can't get that much subject out of. So the story will naturally fall maybe a hair shorter, but I think that's just natural. But well, Randy, thank you so much for coming on. There's one more thing I want to get from you, and book recommendations. So this is what we do, right? We're writers. We're writing books for people. So of your books, what can you recommend for somebody that has not read an R.L. Kennedy title or a Randy Lee Kennedy title, depending on which way you want to go,
Well, I mean,
or one of each? One of each.
yeah, the Underground series, it's so hard to say that I'm not so in love with it because I just did it. So I'm still on that high of, oh my gosh, I loved every single moment. And, so obviously I think it's a good place to start it's my only post-apocalyptic series. There's more coming, but I think that's, a good place to start for people who like that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, yeah, I mean, the sweet romances, I think the style of, my writing's kind of the same in all of them, but that's either your taste or it's not. And I understand it if people, don't sweet romance and post-apoc are very much, two different things. But the Underground series, I think, is a nice, it's a good place to start, especially if you don't read either a lot of post-apocalyptic. I did have a good amount of crossover from my romance audience. And I thought, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. And I had really great feedback from people that liked my romance stories to this.
Okay.
It wasn't as shocking. I mean, my mom thought it was a little more violent than it needed to be, but it's the end of the world. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit, it's not as clean, there's a few more curse words.
Expletives. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, my dad's read every book I've put together. I've had like 27 releases now.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he's read every single one of them. So and he doesn't agree with all of them. but
And I get that. And there's a time and a place for it. And so depending
yeah.
on and I still try to be mindful of things. It's not super gratuitous and it's not super violent. And it's, again, I always having kids, I feel like in the back of my mind, that's always there of like, I still want to be proud of my work. And that's why I'm not, writing erotica and some other money making things, because I want to write something that's still true to me and something that I love and something that, a story I want to tell. So yeah, I think the Underground series, I think it's been pretty well received. And I think if somebody wants to check that out, I think that that'd be a great place to start and just kind of, see where my head's at on that.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious. Just because how old are your kids?
They're 12 and 14. So they're finally getting
Okay.
to the point where like they're almost interested in reading what I've written. And it's like, okay, now you're old enough, you can do that.
Yeah, because like I said, my oldest is 9, and I started writing basically the year she was born.
Okay.
So I've never had like the thought of, oh, I shouldn't write this because of my kids. So
Mhm.
I was curious on the age of your kids, because I was just like, I've never come across that. I mean, later as they get older, sure, but at the
Well,
same time, I've
for,
never like currently, I've never actually been like, oh, I don't know if I should do that because Riley isn't going to want
and that's
to. I mean,
the romance side, but like having a daughter and then the romance elements, like I wanted those to be clean. I wanted them to
huh.
be, I didn't want their, it's weird because a lot of,
Yeah, I have
a,
2 girls, so I get it. I have 2 daughters, so
yeah. So
no boys.
it's, I've got one of each. And so it's funny because like the boy, like that's not even on my radar. Like read whatever, I don't care. But her, it's like, the romance stories, I want her to have, a sweeter view of that as she's coming to
Sure.
all this. So it's just my mindset at the time of her being a young girl, knowing that she's going to read these at some point. So my mind
Sure. Yeah.
then versus as she gets older, like I said, like, okay, I put a few curse words in there. I don't feel bad for it. I felt bad when you were 7 and you didn't know what those were. But now, you've seen some PG-13 movies, like we're good.
Oh, yeah, they've heard so much worse than anything I could probably
Exactly.
write.
Plus, I mean,
Well,
I know.
and I also have a philosophy with the series, and it stems from originally having my dad read everything. Was I remembered that he was reading everything, and I was like, well, what do I think my dad's going to react like?
I've,
And
yeah,
I get it. I completely get it. So it's like my Jack Riley series is like hardcore PG-13.
right.
It goes as it blows into that border as hard as humanly possible without crossing it. So like the language is rougher, but not horrific. Like there's no F bombs, there's no GDs, there's no
Right.
MFs. There's nothing that I would consider gratuitous cursing. Same with like sexuality. There's like hints and like things, but it's also Jack being a little boy at heart. So like his mind wanders and he's just a typical guy. So it's like stuff like that, but it never gets to a point to where I cross the threshold of like unnecessary. Um, I do have other stories like the Zarkane series is definitely PG-13 to R. Like it goes beyond the border that I crossed with Jack, and I did it on very purposefully.
Right.
So I did it because I wanted her character to be that more over the top hardcore. So more willing with violence, more willing with subject matter as far as like conversation. So it was on purpose. Like I kept Jack's series a little cleaner, and I went a little harder with Zara's to kind of fill in the gaps that I don't use with Jack, I guess.
And for me,
Um,
that's the separation with my name of Randy Lee. If it says my full first name on there, like you can
mhm.
do that with your Bible study, Mom. But if it's RL, that's kind of my like, whoa, this may not be right for the Bible study,
Yeah,
Um,
it's funny. It's like it's your more adult books, and yet
yes.
they're all adult books because
Right.
we are. It's like we're not children's author, you know.
It up, you kind of know like which direction it might be going. And so
Sure. Yeah, and I won't talk about who I talked about it with because that's his decision. But I've been talking to another author friend of mine who is kind of going through something professionally as far as what path he wants to keep following as far as subject. And lately, he only writes mostly like monster books.
Mhm.
And he is very much interested in like the hardcore action thriller. But his readers may not be as receptive because his readers expect a certain style of book. It's like when you
Sure.
go too far off genre, like I've done it. I've gone too off genre and the books didn't sell.
Right.
So it's like I get it. I understand it. And he's kind of going through that quandary of like he currently writes under a pen name and he goes, what if I just use or I posed it. I'm like, what if you just use your real name and write action thrillers? Like spy assassin action thrillers like you want to write.
Right.
Like your version of John Wick and James Bond and that kind of stuff, and like Atomic Blonde and like that, like over the top hardcore action. And he's just like, huh? Because he's not as like he even said he goes, I don't feel like I'm as well known yet to where I would lose my audience. Like I feel like I'm still building the audience. So if I want to do it, this would be the time to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, you may want to think about it because I think you could write that genre and that style and do very well in it. I just don't know if you could do it in the current with your current pen name because your readers, the expectation you might actually like lose readers at first.
And it is hard to change genres, and that's something I was worried
Mhm.
about because
I've even thought about it.
a lot of advice though from very seasoned writers is very much stay in your lane, stay in your genre, write what you know, and keep going. And I appreciate that advice, and I do think that there's a lot of you know good reasons to do that. But I think the creativity in your head of if you're being pulled in these different directions, I can't imagine not having written this past series because it was such an exciting, inspiring thing for me to do. And it's not that I won't go back to clean romance at some point, but I don't, I'm fine having both of those things and just kind of trying to keep them separate, but still being true enough to myself that there'll be some crossover, and that's fun too, for people who like.
Yeah, that's my friend Kent Holloway. He's a action adventure thriller writer, but he also writes nonfiction. And
Quite
his,
different.
well, and you know what it is? He is. I'll be talking to him in a couple of weeks, I think. But he's an interesting guy because for 24 years he has been a supervisor with the St. Augustine. What is it called? The St. Augustine Medical Examiner's Office.
Oh,
So he is a murder death investigator.
wow.
So he's a death investigator for the morgue's office, basically for the.
Okay.
So
Incredible.
yeah, he's been doing that for 2+ decades, and his outlook on just death and his outlook on, and he's a devout Christian, and his books are on the nonfiction books. Like one of them is "I Died Swallowing a Goldfish" and other tales of them from the morgue.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's real cases
Yeah, that's
with like the redacted information, and then he goes into like more depth on his own personal beliefs on like certain things within that story and like how it like applies to like life and stuff. And it's a completely super unique way of doing it. And he's had a decent amount of success doing it. And he he's very much like pulp, like action adventure. Like he loves like the island voodoo stuff. He loves like that kind of stuff. He loves the Appalachian like lore with like a lot of like the what do they call them, the old school like creepy like swampy magic ladies, uh like Mama Juju from Princess and the Frog. So like that type of stuff. And so his upbringing is he's Kentucky, so he's got like a lot of that like Appalachian stuff, but the genre flipping that he does, and he actually does pretty well doing it, but I think now it's actually more expected of him. Like, he's done it for so long that the readers are just they're okay with it. But yeah, I was interested in doing that for like science fiction horror. I'm like, there's stories I want to write, but I couldn't write them as Matt James. I mean, they're just nowhere anything close to what I currently write.
and it might just confuse people. I do think that
Yeah.
there's helpful for readers too, to kind of separate those things for their own sake, just so that you always know what you're getting.
Yeah, no matter what you put in the title of the book, it doesn't matter what subtitle it is. People
Right.
don't blah 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 short story in the review. Oh, the book was too short.
Yeah, that's I told you that
Told you
straight up.
that. I'm trying, but okay. And one last a book recommendation from someone else.
In the post-apoc genre, the thing I'm most excited for right now, Kyla Stone's second book is coming out, I think, in the next week or so.
Yeah,
Weight
she
Loss,
just
I think it's
she just released the cover art for it today.
yes. Oh, that
Yes.
was for the third one. So the
Oh,
Light
the
We
third one. Oh, okay, okay.
Seek is coming out, I believe,
Mhm.
in a week or so. And so I'm pumped about that. So I'll read that the day it comes out. So that's
Nice.
next on my list as far as things that I'm excited about. I'm super pumped for that. And then
I will actually be diving into Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle.
very
So I'm super pumped with that, and the story and the premise behind it is super super cool. I would definitely suggest somebody going out and just Amazon it, and it's called Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle. He is like the guy when it comes to techno thrillers and sci-fi and stuff. It's kind of labeled as like a time travel thriller. So I'm really interested to see his take on and this particular story and the subject. I also have this that I wanted to show because this is a great one if people don't know this exists. So this is Uncharted, which is my favorite video game series ever. And of course, we just had the movie released with Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg and Antonio Banderas. Loved it. So regardless of what people think of it, I loved it, but I'm also a fanboy when it comes to this kind of stuff. This is actually an original novel based on all of the characters from the video games called The Fourth Labyrinth. So this is Nate, this is Sully, this is everybody. Written by Christopher Golden. So this book called The Fourth Labyrinth is awesome. It is a truly unique Uncharted story. So if you are a fan of the games like I am, pick this up, and it's just a novelized game. Basically, it's phenomenal. So I would definitely recommend that. And as far as my own, I mean, look for by the time this video comes out, look for Zara Kane. The Anubis Plague is the first book in a new series with myself and Nick Thacker. My first release with Conundrum Publishing, so it's very exciting for me. Very exciting. My first book with Nick as well. So we're both super excited for people to meet Zara. She is my inspiration was the newer Lara Croft and Evie, Evelyn Carnahan from The Mummy, Rachel Weisz's character. So it's kind of it's a very very brutal, violent Evie. So not that brutal, but it's that character, but with Evie's like background and like her knowledge, and she was a linguist for the British military, so she's very good with language.
very cool.
Even though she is an American, she was transplanted to London as a kid, so she is just an American that grew up in London. But she's very good with language, and that's kind of like her superpower is she can speak a lot of languages. So it helps with the world travel book. Jack
Oh.
doesn't speak any languages, so it's actually very funny. I put him in some awful situations because he can't speak anything.
You research all those languages that she speaks? I mean, have you researched all of them?
Well, so the language itself is not actually written in the book. Her dialogue will be in English, but she'll be speaking to somebody in like Italian. So it's I'm not actually writing the language that she is
Okay.
reading or she is
That
speaking. That would be awful. That is something no, thank you. I speak one language and it's bad English, so I'm not about to go out and research these other languages because I don't speak anything. I guess that's where Jack comes from, is me. He just struggles with his own language, let alone someone else's. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that. I think you guys are going to love it. You're going to love Zara. She's just a great character. I was super happy with the way she came out. Everything about her was what I think was perfected. Like everything I wanted in her character, I feel like we accomplished with her backstory, with just the current events that she's going on between both stories that will be released, the full novel and the novelette. But yeah, definitely check those out. Check out Uncharted, check out Kyla Stone's novels, check out Randy's novels. But if y'all liked what you saw, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. We will have more interviews coming up. I have another 5 or 6 booked at least after this one. I'm going to keep going as long as people want to come talk to me and do this for an hour plus. Be more than happy.
I love talking about all this stuff. It's been great.
No, thank you so much, Randy. I really do appreciate coming on. Where can people find your work? Obviously Amazon, but where else can they find you or find your work?
Amazon is where it's at. I'll be honest, I'm a dinosaur. I still love Facebook, and I love readers on Facebook. So I'm all about connecting there. I love when people send me messages. You know, I know some people it invades their personal space, but invade my personal space, not with like weird photos, but you know, besides Facebook.
Gotta watch what you say. Because people will take that to truth.
Facebook, and then obviously Amazon is, you know, a great place to follow, and then that way you get updated on new releases and the next big thing coming out. So
cool. And more information on our releases as well is you can find Randy stuff at conundrumpub.com. You can find my stuff at conundrumpub.com. My website is mattjamesauthor.com. Find me all over Amazon. I'm all over Facebook and Instagram. I love using that stuff. I just like connecting with people and being able to talk about it, because what other outlet is there? So I like using it. It has its advantages, and it has very, very, very many disadvantages as well, but it has its advantages. But thanks everyone for watching. Like I said, please subscribe, please like the show, like the channel, tell your friends, and let's grow this show together. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. See you next time.